Well, on behalf of the Saskatchewan Coroner Service, I'd like to extend my condolences to the families, friends, victims, and survivors of the tragic incident that occurred on James Smith Cree Nation and in the town of Weldon, Saskatchewan. We are grateful to the RCMP, municipal police services, and other law enforcement members who worked tirelessly for Myles Sanderson and the first responders to find Myles Sanderson, and the first responders and healthcare professionals who have provided critical support in James Smith Cree Nation, Weldon, and across the province. I would also like to thank the families of the victims for their patience and understanding as we processed the crime scenes with the RCMP. This was undoubtedly a heartbreaking event to witness. We are confident in the work being done by the RCMP, municipal police services, the Serious Incident Response Team, as well as our team with the Saskatchewan Coroner Service to develop a better picture of this tragedy. The events that occurred require a methodical and complete investigation. With the suspect deceased, there will not be a public criminal trial. Without a public hearing of the facts, it will leave many questions unanswered from the families involved and the public pertaining to the circumstances leading to the deaths. Today, I am announcing that an inquest will be held for the 11 deaths that occurred on the James Smith Cree Nation and in Weldon on September 4, 2022. The Saskatchewan Coroners Act 1999, Section 22, provides the Chief Coroner with the authority to hold one inquest for multiple deaths from the same event. A separate inquest will be held for Myles Sanderson, as his death did not occur during the events of September 4, and he died while in police custody. In the event of a death in custody, Section 20 of the Coroners Act stipulates it is mandatory to call an inquest. The Coroner Service mandate is to conduct inquests in accordance with Section 19 of the Saskatchewan Coroners Act 1999. In this instance, an inquest will be held in accordance with Section 19B to inform the public of circumstances surrounding a death, and Section 19C to bring dangerous practices or conditions to light and facilitate the making of recommendations to avoid preventable deaths. The Coroners Act is very progressive in Saskatchewan. The Act allows the Chief Coroner to form a jury with individuals from a specific cultural group. It is my intention to have the jury wholly comprised of Indigenous persons. The police and the Coroner Service are in preliminary stages of their investigation, which includes toxicology results, pathology and autopsy results, the completion of the police investigation, preparing scene photos and diagrams, completing statements from witnesses, securing and itemizing all exhibits, and preparing reports. As you can appreciate, an inquest cannot be held until the investigation is complete. From there, additional time is required for the administrative aspects of an inquest, such as the assembly and disclosure of the evidence gathered for the various parties that will have standing at the inquest, developing the witness list, preparation time for the inquest coroner, coroner's counsel, and those receiving disclosure, summoning a jury to hear the evidence, determining a location for the inquest, and logistics. While this is in progress, the Coroner Service will be reaching out to the families of the victims to explain the reason for an inquest, the process, and offer their support throughout the inquest process. It is estimated that an inquest could occur in late spring or early summer 2023. The time frame is common when preparing an inquest. The service will move as quickly as possible to facilitate the inquests. Some may question where there will be an inquest opposed to a public inquiry, similar to the recent inquiry in Nova Scotia. The province of Nova Scotia does not have the legislated ability to hold inquests. Therefore, a public inquiry is held. A public inquest in Saskatchewan will serve the same purpose, with the added ability to have a jury hear the facts, make recommendations, and hopefully prevent future occurrences. I would like to remind the families and the public that an inquest is not designed to find fault. It is a hearing to establish the events leading to the death, find a medical cause of death, the manner of death, and provide recommendations from the jury to prevent similar occurrences. Thank you for your patience as we continue the investigation process. I would now like to open it up for questions. I would ask that you please state your name and the media outlet that you represent. There will be an opportunity to ask one question and one follow-up question before moving on to the next reporter.
You said that the first inquest will be about the 11 deaths. Does that mean that James Sanderson will be included in that first inquest?
At this time, that's what we were hoping that we could do that, but we'll wait to see as the further investigation comes through.
And you said that you would like the juries for these to be entirely comprised of Indigenous peoples. Can you explain why?
This happened on a First Nation. It impacted the First Nation community wholly, and I believe that to make sure that the people on that First Nation feel comfortable with the people that are going to hear the results.
Sam Sampson from CBC National. I'm just hoping that you could explain a little further the differences between the public inquiry and this inquest, because, as you mentioned, people really, really want answers.
Yes.
So they want transparency. So if you could.
Okay. Well, the reason that we're calling a public inquest is for the transparency, so that we can have a hearing where all the evidence is brought forth. A jury will hear the evidence, they'll weigh the evidence, make recommendations. That doesn't happen in an inquiry. It's a different setup altogether. There's not a jury of their people that live in that area or from that area to hear the evidence. So the idea of an inquest is to be local to the people that it affects, that they get to hear the facts, and that the decisions are made from there.
And that's totally public?
It's totally public. Everything will be public. There'll be a full disclosure to the people that have standing prior to the inquest. And at the inquest itself, it's open to the public, it's open to the media, anybody can attend, and there'll be, the witnesses will give their evidence, all the evidence that's been gained by the police will give their evidence, completely open to the public.
And it mentions support throughout the process for families. What does that support look like?
We have a family liaison consultant, and we'll probably be asking for some other people with the expertise to work with the families ahead of time so they understand the process of an inquest, what to expect, and what we can provide them for assistance as we go through the inquest itself. Because there'll be many questions. Most people have never attended an inquest, and we're there as their arm of support.
Alison Bamford with CTV. Just going off of Lisa's question with Damien Sanderson. So since he's being grouped into those 11, does that mean right now coroners are thinking that he died on September 4th and is maybe considered a victim? Can you give us any
No, that we've made no leap to that at all. It's just that everything that had happened was on September the 4th that we believe. So as the coroner, I'm allowed to put all those multiple deaths into one inquest. If something comes up from the RCMP investigation in the future that would discredit that or make it different, then we will change that plan. But as it stands right now, we're looking at all 11 deaths from the First Nation and Weldon for one inquest.
And have all of the autopsies for those 11 as well as Myles Sanderson been completed yet?
The preliminary portion has been done, but we will still be waiting for the toxicology, the final pathology report, and there's some neuropathology that we'll be waiting for as well. And that's going to take at least probably 3 to 4 months before we find those results. Yes.
The Myles Sanderson inquest, is that, we expect that to happen before this, the 11th death inquest, as far as the time frame goes?
You know, I don't know exactly how the time frame will that work. This will be an inquest that's larger than normal to start with for the victims on the First Nation. I would think that we would want to take care of the victims first for the inquest, and then we'll worry about the other inquest after that.
And as far as the location, I know you talked about local input, local feedback. You have an idea of where you want this to?
It will be in as close proximity where we could host it to the James Cree First Nation. That could be Melfort, could be Prince Albert, it could be right on the First Nation yet. We'll be working on the logistics of that and working with the local chief and the tribal council there.
Here with the Canadian Press, I was just wondering, when was the last time that an inquest was held into mass deaths like this on this scale?
We've never had one this large in the province of my knowledge. We did have one maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know the exact date. There was deaths in the long-term care home of carbon monoxide poisoning. I believe 5 deaths. And the coroner of the day, chief coroner of the day, held one inquest in that.
And then, you know, when the mass casualties did occur, did the Saskatchewan Coroner Service, I guess, execute their mass fatality plan? And maybe can you discuss the role that the Saskatchewan Coroner Service had in those early days?
Okay, we did a smaller version of our mass fatality plan. We sent our North Regional Supervising Coroner to the scene to act as a on-scene commander for our group. We sent 2 coroners to the scene. They visited every scene, made sure that all the bodies were identified properly, and then were transported into Saskatoon for autopsy. So our coroners were on scene at every scene with the RCMP hand in hand, working with them at the crime scenes. Yes?
Does this mean that we won't be getting any more information on these things, such as the cause of death of Myles Sanderson, until there's an inquest happening?
That's correct. The cause of death we determined by the jury. So the coroner service, once an inquest is called, the jury decides on the cause of death from the evidence that they hear, and they'll decide on the manner of death.
Why would a jury decide on the cause of death? Isn't that the coroner's job?
No, that's why we have an inquest. So it's a public inquest with a jury that hears all the evidence, and they decide on, they'll hear all the evidence given by the forensic pathologists from the police, and they decide on the manner and cause of death. That's how inquests work, right across the Commonwealth.
So when that toxicology report is then released, or completed 3 to 4 months, will that be released to the public?
No,
And no autopsy
No.
results will be released?
it will all be released in whole at the inquest. That's the idea of an inquest, to make sure all the evidence is gathered properly and presented all in a organized fashion.
So I'm assuming then when Saskatchewan police do their, independent investigation, they'll be given those results as well?
The Saskatoon police will get the results, and the RCMP will get the results because they're in the investigating agencies.
Yeah. Can they decide to give it, to release it publicly, or is it legislated that they can't?
It should remain under the domain of the coroner service. When we give disclosure to the people that have standing ahead of time and the families, specific waivers are signed of confidentiality that they have to hold that until the inquest.
This is one of the worst mass killings in recent Canadian history. How fair is it to make the public wait almost a year for answers?
Well, I think we have processes in Canada, due processes, to make sure that the public is aware of what's happened. It takes time to put the picture together. The last thing we want is to give out some preliminary information, and then witnesses at the inquest give different information, and now we've got a real quagmire of what really did happen. So it's prudent to make sure we have all the information, everything is gathered in a proper form, and then presented at an inquest.
How urgent do you find this specific case to be, considering that it's such a public safety matter?
Oh, certainly very urgent, and we're going to work as quickly as we can. I've given you a time frame. It's probably the absolute longest it will take, and if we can get it done in a shorter time frame, then we will do that.
And you're former Saskatoon police chief.
Yes.
Correct. This is kind of similar to Mickey's question, but can you just talk about the scale and scope of an investigation like this from the coroner's service?
Well, it's certainly a large, complex investigation. That's going to take many, many hours to put the pieces together, and of course, the reporting and the documenting afterwards is huge. So, I think people see the police or the coroners going to a scene, and it's assumed that we can take care of all that very quickly because now we've seen the scene and we can come to our conclusions. But there's a lot of work that has to be done, verifying facts, quantifying facts, making sure that the diagrams, that everything is ready for court. The courts expect now, and our inquests expect a higher level of presentation now when we do our inquests, so that it's easily accessible from the public, and that can be easily transmitted to people that are listening to it. So it's a very, very big, complex issue that, especially with dealing with multiple families, different interests, trying to work with the families. So there's investigative parts, there's working with the family parts, there's documenting parts, and then there's going to be the presenting parts as well too.
And sorry, just to clarify, is the jury going to be completely Indigenous, and has that ever happened before?
Yes, we've held it a couple of times. We had one in Black Lake 3 years ago. It was complete Indigenous jury. And we held that right on the First Nation in Black Lake.
How many jury members do you expect to have?
There's 6 jury members are allowed for the act. Yep. And I will advise, and this is the only information I can give out right now because I know there's a lot of interest in this, but the preliminary results of the autopsy for Myles Sanderson, and this is very preliminary, has found no blunt force trauma causing his death. So from the external examination from our chief forensic pathologist, there is no external blunt force trauma that was contributing to his death. So we still need the toxicology report yet, the pathology, and the neuropathology report. So this is very, very preliminary, but that's the best I can give you right now.
What does that say to you? No blunt force trauma.
It shows that there is no outward pressure that would have caused his death. I'm not going to surmise what that means.
Why would you choose to reveal that in police custody? Are you trying to keep any response from the Indigenous community that he was beaten by the police?
Not at all, because I think...
That's very specific, sir.
Yes.
What you're saying.
Yep.
And you just outlined that you're not going to release any specific details about this.
Yep.
And yet you're releasing this.
Yes.
What is the purpose of releasing that, saying that the police did not beat this man while he was in custody, which the Indigenous community is highly, they're thinking that, this guy was pounded by the cops.
I absolutely agree with your point on that. And the reason I'm putting that out now because I know there is so much interest in this publicly. And all I want to do is give out one preliminary fact, and we'll let the rest of it when the jury and the inquest is held.
Are you breaching your own rules by doing this?
I don't believe so.
I spoke to a vice chief on James Smith Cree Nation, and they had said that, they want information, but they don't want any recording details right now. Have you had any conversations with leadership on First Nation regarding something like that? And is this,
No.
maybe possibly why no information is being released right now?
I've not had personally, but the coroners that were responsible at the scene contacted each family member. By yesterday, every family member was contacted, explained why we're having an inquest, and what the process might be as we work forward.
And do you know what their response was to that, or?
I believe it was positive. I don't have any reports that there was any anger towards calling an inquest.
I also go back to what Richard was mentioning. Why would you give us that preliminary information right now if Myles Sanderson's death is under police investigation?
Yeah. I think it's important that the public hears and the media hears and the families hear what we have very, very preliminary on this. And that's what I'm mentioning is very, very preliminary. But I think it's important that some information come out because people are waiting for some information on this. So I've given that small amount just up front.
Why not give more?
Well, then we're going to certainly taint the whole inquest process if I do that. That's why everything will be presented to a jury. They'll hear the evidence from the forensic pathologist. They'll hear the evidence from the witnesses, and they will determine what the cause and the manner of death is. I'm not certainly saying any cause or any manner here at all. All I'm saying is what we had very, very preliminary.
During an incident like this, do you have to get the permission of the family member to do an autopsy on, Myles Sanderson or any of the others?
No, under the Coroners Act, we have the authority to conduct an autopsy.
So the family can't do its own autopsy by hiring outside pathologists?
Oh, absolutely. If the family wished to have another autopsy completed, that certainly would be an option for them, yes.
Do you have any other preliminary results?
No. 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 Okay, well, thank you very much for coming down this morning.